Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Manx as the Hills podcast, the Kriss in China series, episode 1, where we talk about what expat living in China is really like. Today, we're taking a quick look at some of the most asked questions from our podcast community and dive into what expat life is really like with a family and the impact it has. Remember, you can join in on the conversation through our social media channels at Manx Podcast. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another podcast with your host Kriss Parker from Manx as the Hills podcast. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in to this podcast journey. I really appreciate all the support. In this podcast series, Kriss in China, we'll be looking at myself, my journey through China, my families, as well as answering all the questions that you guys have asked me regarding my time here in China. Okay, so guys, what is this podcast series about? Well, the Manx as the Hills podcast is divided into 3 categories. One, we have our motivational and inspirational podcast short messages, what we call snippets. We also have our podcast stories, which is from the community, where we interview people who live not only in China but have traveled abroad with their families or by themselves, but have general living experience and working abroad that they want to share with you. And some of these people have incredible stories to share. The third part is this podcast series that we're here listening to now. Kriss in China is a new podcast series which dives into my life in China, my life experiences, my family's, but also the time that we spent here is close to 15 years. And we want to share that with you to answer the questions that you guys have and to answer anything that you may want to know. Not only about living abroad, working abroad, traveling, but life in general, raising children. And a lot of these questions are coming from our community since starting this podcast journey. I started Kriss in China podcast series to answer these questions directly, to give you guys a chance to hear some of your questions live on the podcast, and so that I can present them in a very easy way for everybody to understand, so that my message comes across clearly as to what life is really like with children, with family, living abroad. I just want to say a big thank you to all our community. I really appreciate everybody's support and the questions that have come in to our podcast, so that I can answer these directly with you in this short podcast series called Kriss in China. So one of the biggest questions that I'm asked, and it's one of the easiest, and remember, this podcast goes globally, not only worldwide outside of China, but also inside China to the local community who also listen to this podcast. And they have many questions about myself, my family. And today, guys, in this podcast, we're going to answer some of the top questions that you have asked me about myself, my family, my journey in China. And as we continue this podcast series, we'll be answering more questions along the way. So one of the biggest questions that I'm asked, and it's one of the easiest, is who am I? Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Kriss Parker. I'm the producer and host of Manx Podcast, and I'm originally from a very small country located in the middle of the Irish Sea called the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is a beautiful country, most famously known for its cats, its large horses, its trams, a large working water wheel, and of course the TT motorbike racing. I first came to China in 2005, who then was my girlfriend today, who is now my wife, and we made a decision to travel together once we finished college and graduated to come to China and explore the world together. So as we were young and we were just exploring China together, we decided at that time, after about 3 months, which was the time we had decided to come to China for, was to make a decision to stay. Since then, we have been in China for close to 15 years, and time has just gone incredibly fast during our time here within China. So the second biggest question that many people ask is, why China? Why did we make a decision to stay here? Well, in all honesty, we did choose China, but we kind of also felt China chose us. At the time, there was a lot of opportunities for us to grow, to develop as people, both professionally and personally, and we decided to stay here to try and see what life would be like if we decided to stay. China has been an incredible place to live, and it still is today. We absolutely love it, and it's become our home, not only for ourselves, but also for our 2 children. As they go to school here, they grow up, they've got local friends, and as adults, we do too. Our lives have moved on, and most of our life, our adult life, is located now in China. So China is an amazing place where sometimes, though, yeah, of course, we do miss home, we want to go traveling other places, but China seems to keep pulling people back. Now, you could say this about any place that you become familiar with, but China has a very unique feeling that once you leave, you kind of miss a feeling that is no longer there. And when you come back, you kind of feel like, oh, it's normal again. Now, sure, not everybody might feel the same way, but it's definitely how we feel, that every time we come to a discussion or talk about what are our future options, we always discuss China as being a permanent home for us. Okay, so the next question that I'm asked a lot is, what do I do? Now, I've done a lot of things in my 15 years in China. I've gone from working with very small startup companies to large multinational organizations. At the moment, I currently work for an international school here in Western China, located in the city of Xi'an, where I oversee the logistics operations for the campus to ensure the school is safe, healthy, well-maintained, and meets the operation needs of the school's community. This is a full-time job where I manage several departments, and I oversee the running and daily operation of each department and their teams, the best care that we can provide to the school's community. Of course, I've not always been in logistics. My background is primarily in IT. I've worked for several large multinational IT corporations, including Intel and ATI Industries. This work experience from these large organizations here in China have given me solid foundation in my skills to allow me to keep improving and also expand my future job opportunities here, not only in China, but globally throughout the world. I've been very fortunate to be able to have these job opportunities, and I thank everybody who I've been able to work with, especially not only my current colleagues, but previous colleagues who I fully enjoy working with in the past. These job opportunities have been amazing, and something I feel I wouldn't been able to have that opportunity if I had stayed in my home country, the Isle of Man. Though things would have been different and job availability would be very, very different, but the skills and the mindset that I've grown into, not only because I'm in a foreign country, but also because the variety of work I've had inside China has been amazing, and an opportunity that will last me my lifetime, that I can share not only with you as you're watching this podcast live, but also with my children, so that they can grow in terms of dealing with things not only here in China, but should they make a decision to also go abroad themselves to find work, to study, or whatever the future may hold for them. Talking about work and family, the next question that I'm asked a lot is, why 15 years? I mean, 15 years is a long time. That's almost half my life. So I've spent most of my adulthood in China. Once we graduated college, we pretty much boarded a plane, hit China running, and since I've landed, I've always worked in China. There was a small couple of years period where we did make the decision to go back to the Isle of Man, and we stayed in the Isle of Man for a couple of years before making another decision to come back to China. Things have been a little bit complicated here and there. You know, you miss home, you miss family, certain situations might come up, but 15 years in China is how long we've been here, and time has just flown by. Now, of course, time flies for everybody no matter where they are, but I feel in China, time has a different feeling where a year just seems to go so fast with everything that goes on living in a large city such as Tianjin, Shanghai, Beijing, and currently now Xi'an. So each year we discuss as a family, what are our future plans? What do we plan to do in the future? Are we going to stay? Are we looking at other opportunities? Are we going to decide to move to a different city? Or are we going to look at other options abroad? Or maybe even return back home? But for now, China is our home and we love it. 15 years in China has been a long time, and of course we're used to the culture, the customs, and we've made a lot of friends here as well. But 15 years is also a long time and a challenging time for us to go back home. Things have moved on. Our friends and family, they see us differently. A lot of our friends have moved on, or themselves have also made decisions to move to other places throughout the world. So returning back home, we will return with not many people that we know or personally know very closely anymore. Starting those kind of relationships again is challenging for anybody, and sure, yeah, anybody can do it, but our children and ourselves, we have very close friends here in China, and that is an added weight for us to stay. Of course, we can always make a decision to leave. For now, we're very happy with our current situation, the friendships that we've developed here, and our living environment here in China, and we do plan to see several more years added on to that already very long timeline of 15 years in China. So having been in China for 15 years, the next question that many people ask is, what is China like? Well, China's just like any other city, to be honest. It's busy, there's a lot of traffic, a lot of people. The difference is the people in every city are different. The culture, the feeling, the customs, even the language. There are so many cultural aspects that you need to take into consideration. When you move to another city in China, you cannot expect the same things to happen. The mindsets, the attitude, the way people work, the way people communicate, even simple things as saying hello are done differently in China depending where you are. And I think that's incredible to go to so many different places and completely feel you're in a different place is quite a unique experience. Sure, I'm sure there's many other countries quite similar to this, but China is so unique in that way. When you go to other cities, it's a very unique feeling that you get. The daily life here in China, well, it's just like any other city. We go to work, children go to school, we plan things on the weekend, play dates, going out, shopping, whatever it may be, and just general life. I guess the biggest thing for myself is I'm from a very small country, the Isle of Man. I mean, if you have a world globe right now or go and look at Google Maps, it's not that easy to find. Though you can zoom in, but you're going to be zooming in quite some time before you actually see how big the country is. So moving from the Isle of Man to China, it was a big shock to me. And sure, there was a lot of cultural moments that really hurt. Coming from a small town, there's also a lot of things you've got to remember. Difference between thinking of a small country to city life, how you get about, how you travel, how you live, where you go and get your groceries. There's so many different aspects. The way living in a large city, which I'm currently doing now in Xi'an, which has close to 14 million residents. My hometown had probably around 20,000 residents. So the Isle of Man is known for being very small at around somewhere between 80 to 90,000 residents. So you can imagine me moving at such a young age all the way to China and being here for 15 years. Yeah, things were challenging at first and things are still challenging. Things crop up even now after 15 years later that still surprise me. The daily life here is very unique. There's not one day you kind of wake up and feel it's going to be the same day. Sure, unless you're going to sit on the couch and watch TV all day. I don't recommend this. But the life here has a very different pace. Originally, I lived in Tianjin for close to 10 years in China. I've now lived in Xi'an for 5 years. Each city provides a different way of living. The feeling you get is completely different. The vibe, the attitude, the way people communicate, how people even work, how they respond to work, how they see their lives is also different depending on the city culture as well. And it's such a unique experience that there's not one day I've spent in China where I've woken up and kind of said to myself, oh, I have to go to work today. Sure, we all get like that. Who doesn't? But there's not one day where I've always felt I'm stuck in the same thing, knowing that there are so many opportunities here in China, not only for myself, but for my family, and that we can look elsewhere if we ever wanted to. I feel that life here is very open, and that's something I see within Chinese culture. Chinese people go for things. When they want something, they go for it. Yeah, sure, they work hard. The attitude here is that if you want something, you go for it. Every time I walk down the road, I see new shops opening, small shops by independent business owners where they've just decided to go and do what they wanted to do, whether it's to open a tea house, sell vegetables, whatever it may be. They actually go out and do it. Whereas back home, I kind of feel like the attitude is in reverse. People worry, they panic. There's a fear about doing anything by yourself. And sure, we understand the reasons why. But here, they work hard, they plan, and they just strive to go and achieve. Every time I talk to somebody here, everybody is trying to do something to better themselves. And I also kind of feel like that's rubbed off on me, as that's what I'm trying to do, not only with myself and my family, but with this podcast journey that I'm sharing with you guys as well. So one of the biggest questions that this is kind of weird because I'm asked this a lot, to be honest, and I kind of find it strange, but coming from the UK, I fully understand where this is coming from. So the next question is, what's the food like and is it good? Well, yeah, the food here is amazing and it's just one of the things I absolutely love about China. Depending where you're from and which city you live in, the food will be different. In Xi'an, they love spicy food. They love hot pot. They love something called rojamo, which is kind of like I mean, now guys, describing food is not the easiest thing, because I can say the term bread, and in China, bread is something different than it is in England. Yeah, sure, you can still get 2 loaves of bread, but there's a lot of different ways that they cook and make bread here. So Rojam Mo, the easiest way I can explain this is like a crusty kind of roll, kind of bap with meat in it, and they eat it for breakfast. It's delicious. Actually, you can eat it any time of the day. It doesn't really matter. But it's great. It's one of the best things in Xi'an, and I absolutely love it. Now, coming from Tianjin, living there for 10 years, Tianjin is famously known for its breakfast. Now, yeah, sure, there are some local famous Tianjin dishes. You know, gobbly baozi is one of them. But some of the most famous dishes in Tianjin, I actually don't like. I think they're actually one of the worst dishes that Tianjin have. But I do enjoy some of the cultural dishes that Tianjin have, especially when it comes to breakfast. Breakfast is one of my favorite meals of the day. I don't always eat breakfast, but in Tianjin, they had a breakfast that you could eat every day that would be different. So they had restaurants that would sell these food, or on the street, you could go down the market, buy some breakfast, and it'll be different every day. You could choose something, at least something different every day for 2 weeks, and not have the same thing twice. That's amazing to me. Back home, we just think of bacon sandwiches, your sausage baps, bowl of cereal, and maybe some toast. Sure, for those healthy options, you can have some fruit as well. But here, you can get all of that and more, and have something different every day for 2 weeks, and not have the same thing, and not even close to the same thing, not even a similar taste. And I just thought that was amazing. But with food comes local food, and this is where the culture comes into. A lot of people back home ask me, what's the Chinese takeouts like? Well, here they're not called Chinese takeouts, they're just called takeouts, and they are not the same. If you go back home in the Isle of Man, or the UK in general, they're all pretty much the same. If you order yourself sweet and sour pork, fried rice, curry, you are getting a Western version of Chinese food. It has been westernized to cater to the palates of Westerners. Usually it's even sweeter. There's a lot of sweet stuff in Western foods. Here in China, it is very different. The only way I can explain it is it's flavorsome. The flavor in China in local food is so palatable that when you eat it, you can taste the ingredients that they've used. Whereas back home, you get a curry, you taste the curry, sure, but you're scoffing it in your mouth and you're just enjoying the food for what it is. Here, there are just so many flavors in the food that it's just incredible. It really is. They really care about the food and how they serve it. Now, right now, I don't have any food with me, but I'm sure one day in a future Kriss in China podcast, I would love to record something where I'm in a local restaurant sharing with you some of the local cultural food. Stay tuned for that podcast, and hopefully it'll come soon. So in terms of local food, it's amazing. You can get pretty much anything you want. One of the things you can get, sure, you can get Western food. We've got Western supermarkets. You can order online. You can go to the local grocery stores, wherever you need. Yep, there are some things that are difficult to get. Bisto gravy, for example. If you're into your Sunday dinners, yeah, you've got to import that bad boy in. That's not something you can just grab off the shelf. Heinz baked beans as well. You've got to go to an imported supermarket for that. So there are some comfort foods that we have to actually go out our way to get. But in general, the food here is so good that we don't really tend to eat those kind of foods daily. Of course, my wife cooks a lot too. So that's an added bonus for not only myself, but also my family and my kids, who, when we come home, we sit down, we have a delicious dinner together. And yeah, every day is going to be different, where we have both Western food one day, Chinese food another. And of course, we mix and match some other foods from other local vendors that are available. Last night we had an Indian and it was delicious. So the food here is fantastic, but the local food is just something that is amazing, that they're able to do such a thing with so many ingredients and create something that's so delicious that you fully enjoy the food that you're eating, but you also respect the food that you're eating because you know how hard the chef has worked to get all those flavors into a dish that you're now stuffing into your face pretty much. So the food here, it is not the same as back home. It really isn't. Your local Chinese takeaway is not the same as takeaways over here. Not at all. So on to the next question. And this question kind of hits home a little bit. Just even seeing the question bring back a lot of memories. And this is, do I miss home? Of course. Home is home, and it will always be home. My family are there. I still have friends there. I'm from a very unique place where you cherish your home. The Isle of Man is a very, very special place. It's beautiful. It's unique. There's a lot of advantages to living there. And every year it gets more and more difficult to not be back home. We make an active decision to stay in China according to what's going on in the world, our current situation, whether it be our jobs or financial situations or whatever else is going on around us. We make those decisions together as a family that we stay here for certain reasons. We also make that decision that every time we stay here, we're making that decision not to go back home. And yeah, it hurts. It really does. The Isle of Man is such a unique place, even more so now that I have two young children who, in my eyes, growing up in the Isle of Man, is such a free place for children. The parks, the beaches, the rivers, the walks, the mountains, the valleys, so many things to be done outside that's how I grew up. I grew up camping, whether it be in my back garden or in a forest. I grew up going out with my friends, whether it's that jumping on my bike, going on a skateboard, whatever that may be. And those are some of the things that my children don't have the opportunity to do. City living is very, very different, but especially in China. There's just a different way of living here in terms of doing things outdoors. Of course, you can say the same even if you lived in the UK or other areas of the world, that once you live in a city, you lose a lot of that freedom. Whereas on the Isle of Man, it's on your doorstep. You open your front door and you see views of mountains, Barul, for example, Snaefell, or any of those places that you know that if you wanted to, you could just go up and walk, take a tram, whatever it is, but you feel that sense of freedom. And that is something that not only do I miss, but I miss having that opportunity to give to my children. Sure, they have a lot of advantages and different opportunities. One, living in China. Two, living in a big city. And three, our expat life, where we've been able to travel the world with our children for them to see a lot more than I ever did at their age. But there's still something about missing home. And of course, every year we make a decision to stay here. It's a decision that we've made not to go back home, and it gets harder. It does not get easier. So though you might be used to the lifestyle here, you might have friends here, and you understand the situation that you're in as a family or personally as an individual, it gets harder and harder each year for two reasons. One, you're not with your family. You miss your parents, you miss your friends, whatever else is back home waiting for you, that you know that you're losing that connection with them the longer you stay apart, and it gets harder. The second reason is the friends that you make here in China are not here forever, and every year you see somebody that you've got to know very well make a decision for themselves and their family to then go back home while you've made a decision to stay. So you're saying goodbye a lot, whether it's myself saying goodbye or my children with their friends also leaving as well with their families. So there's a lot of emotions about missing home, and it gets harder every year. But of course, we have a lot of support from our friends and our family, and though we do try to stay in touch, the realism of it is that once somebody leaves China, it's very difficult to stay in touch. But thankfully, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, social media allows us to bridge that gap a lot, but it's still a challenge each year as we make a decision to stay here, that we're not going to be with our family back home. But of course, neither are my children, and it gets harder all the time. Last year and this year, due to COVID, we said goodbye to a lot of close friends who made a decision to leave China and not return. One, because of COVID, but two, because they've just decided that time for them is done for that part of their lives. And for the last 2 years, it's been very, very difficult as a family to make a decision to stay here while we see everybody else leave. So moving on from missing home to what we're doing now is, of course, I'm still the head of logistics for an international school here in Xi'an. My wife still works as well. My two children, they're young, they go to school, but they've got a lot of friends, a lot of things, activities that we arrange for them on the weekend and after school. We get by as everybody else does, no matter where you are. Why have we started this podcast? Well, to be honest, there are many reasons. One, I wanted to share my story, and this podcast, Kriss In China, this series podcast will share with you that journey as to why we are still here, what we have done, what I've done, looking back over 15 years of China, and then also looking forward as to what we feel our plans are, but also what we feel China's plans are, as well as a country and everything else in between. But I also started this to develop myself. I wanted something where I could be creative, but also develop my skills in terms of, film editing, audio editing. I'm currently using Adobe for a lot of my work, Photoshop, After Effects, Premiere. I'm also using applications such as OBS, Film Studio, and also just working with the equipment in general. I wanted something to be creative, not only for myself, but also to bring my children alongside, that they can also create something and be creative themselves, but also learn about technology. So I wanted to put this podcast together to share this globally, the story of somebody coming from the smallest country, moving to one of the biggest countries in the world, and staying here for 15 years, having grown up here, but also raising a family, 2 children, married for close to 14 years, and time has gone on. And I just wanted to put this story together and share this on a weekly, monthly basis, and that is why I created the Manx as the Hills podcast. The name of the podcast speaks from my hometown, Manx. So our nationality from the Isle of Man is that you are Manx. As the Hills means you will never forget the Isle of Man. I wanted to use a name that kind of grounded the 2 points. So the Manx as the Hills podcast started because I wanted to share my story, but also to give anybody, whether you're from the Isle of Man or anywhere else in the world, that it doesn't matter where you are, you can make it happen. Coming from the smallest town, one of the smallest towns in the smallest country in the world, then making a trip over to China, and now developing as much as I've come, and also my family, I wanted to share that story and to also inspire others to also think about their own lives and their own decisions. Not to say that everybody needs to travel to China, but also to think about the opportunities that are waiting for you outside of your own comfort zone, outside your own front door, and to see what options that I can create through my experience for you guys as you listen to this podcast series. So finally, guys, as we come to an end of this podcast episode, Kriss in China, there are going to be more episodes to come as I share my experience and my life journey here in China past the 15 years and previous before then inside China and from the Isle of Man. What's to come? And this is one of the biggest questions many people are asking is, what's to come from the podcast? Well, to be honest, the podcast is going to be divided up to 3 different series and possibly a 4th, which is still in the works. But the 3 main series are, we have our main podcast series, which each week we interview somebody to share their life experience inside China or generally as a global expat, and to share their story with you as to how traveling abroad, working abroad has impacted their lives, how it has affected their lives, what challenges they have faced, especially those that might be traveling globally with a family, and to share that with you listening or watching this podcast so that you have a deeper understanding of what it's like to live and travel abroad and even become an expat where you no longer live in your home country, but you've made a decision for 3, 4, 5 years to go and do something somewhere else. What kind of things you need to prepare yourself for. It doesn't have to be China, though Chinese culture is very strong and there's a lot of things you need to be aware about, and we will share those, but every country has its challenges, no matter where you're going, no matter where you're coming from. And we wanted to share that with you so that you have the tools and the knowledge that you can not only prepare yourself, but should you have a husband, children that you're bringing with you, that you have a better insight as to what's to come for you, and you have a better understanding of how to prepare yourselves, prepare your children, and how to support each other through challenging times. So I would just like to say a big thank you to everybody for all your support for this podcast journey. This is something that I've started myself. I do a lot of the work on the scenes, a lot of the video editing, audio editing, and I really want to encourage everybody, please like, share any of the videos or the podcasts, that if you do enjoy the information that we're sharing, or you have any questions that you feel that would be a really good topic to bring to the podcast, or maybe there's something in general that you want to know, maybe you've thought about traveling abroad but it's too scary, too risky, or things to watch out for. I want to be able to share my knowledge, but also the knowledge of others around me as a community as to how to better prepare yourself and how to give you the answers. So I would appreciate everybody's support if you could share the Manx podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're also on Twitter as well, or to visit our website, manxpodcast.com. All the likes and sharing, guys, are greatly appreciated to get our message out for the podcast and to also inspire inspire others that maybe you know a friend who is thinking or is already abroad but going through some challenging or difficult times, or might have some questions in general. We want to build this community to share our knowledge, share our understanding with everybody, and to support everybody globally as to the impact you guys can have when you make a decision for your own lives to step out of the area where you were born and raised, and to go and do something much more challenging or different with your lives, which could be something as big as leaving your country and moving to another one for whatever reason. Now, it doesn't have to be that big, and maybe you enjoy the podcast for what it is and you enjoy listening to some of the stories that people are sharing. And believe me guys, we will have some very interesting people on our podcast who have incredible stories and crazy things that they've been through and the challenges they've had to overcome to still continue their lives as expats. But there's a lot of things going on, not only within their own lives or things locally where they've lived, but also back home as well. So I just want to say a big thank you to the community for all your support, everything that you're doing, and I really appreciate if you could like, share, and promote the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. This is the end of episode 1 for Kriss in China's podcast series, and the next podcast series will be here very, very soon. Until next time, guys, this is Kriss. Have an amazing time no matter where you are. Look after yourselves, keep safe, and until next time, guys, this is Manx Podcast signing out. Hey, thanks for listening, and remember to get the latest updates on our podcast episodes. Join our social media channels at Manx Podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, then please leave a like, a comment, and feel free to share. Until next time,